Hello, welcome wherever you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And this is AWS On Air, the first episode of 2023 about startups. So if you're someone, you want to build a business this year, you maybe have a startup and you're thinking, hey, what are the things, the best practices that I should be doing to build my startup? Got to make sure I can scale securely. This is the place. We're going to be here every single Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or whatever time zone you're in that falls in that time zone. This is the show for it. So put your questions in the chat. This is really meant for you. That's why we're here. And today's episode is going to be all about your first 30 days. What are the things that you should be doing in your AWS account in your first 30 days? So let's do some intros. So my name is Jillian Ford, and I am a startup solutions architect. Oh, we've got India's in the house. Hello, good afternoon. And Faisal, I got my amazing co-host, Faisal.
Yeah, thanks, Jillian. What a start to the year. Thanks for having me on. And I'm honored to be the first co-host of this series. Yeah, my name is Faisal. I'm also a solutions architect. I work with our startups based out of New York. And it's kind of awesome to see such a global audience in the comments.
Oh my God. Yeah, all over the
Please
world.
post your location. Tell us
Ghana,
what city you're
6
dialing in
p.m.
from.
Benedict in the UK. Samuel from Ghana at 6 p.m. Wow. Oh my gosh, I love it. These people are hungry. I mean, that's what I love looking for when I'm talking to startups, right? They're hungry and gritty to be able to learn and build their business. So yeah, this is about the first 30 days after opening an AWS account. 11:32 p.m. in India. Wow, that is absolutely amazing. So let's get right into it. So the first thing is, all right, you've opened up your AWS account. What do you do? What are the first things that you should be doing? And yes, I know a lot of you are eager to start building your business. But there's definitely things from a security perspective, cost optimization perspective that you can do right away. And so, Faisal, what's one thing that you would suggest if someone in this audience was like, Faisal, what should I do? What do you think? What would you tell them?
Yeah, there actually. So that's a great one, and I don't think there's a good one-stop shop, but I think we did create some resources that are going to be helpful. So as you mentioned, Jillian, security is the kind of like the top one that should be on your mind. In the early stages of your startup, the account itself is kind of like the main asset, or like the main thing you have to protect and build into. So is it okay if I share my screen, Jillian?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me, oh, maybe I'm already doing that. Okay, there you go. So I'm just pulled into my AWS console, but let me see if changing. What we have published is something called AWS Startup Security Baseline. And there's a lot of security related things in there, but there are things in there that you could be doing in the first 30 days, right? The purpose of publishing this, there's a lot of other security guidance out there in the AWS or just on the internet, but this is focused for those early stage startups, your day one. What could you be doing?
Yeah.
You have your startup idea, you got into accelerator or something, and now you're ready to build, right?
And Faisal, it makes me think like there's probably people here who are like, all right, I'm ready to start building. Why is security so important like right away to even start thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, in the early days, you don't have a lot of funding or money to be kind of spending, and the reason it's important is to protect your account. Is you don't want have your AWS keys or something out there internet mistakenly, or misconfigurations that could cause you to maybe lose your credits or even waste money basically. So you want to make sure that you protect this account. And it's very easy. We make it very easy. There are a couple of basic things you could do to do that. And AWS has a lot of tooling. There's something that you can do, from simple things like MFA to making sure you have correct information configured in the account. So if we detect something, we're able to reach out to you. So that's why.
Yeah, and it's it is an unfortunate reality that if you're not necessarily doing your homework beforehand of being able to protect your AWS account, there are real risks of these. Your attack could get your AWS account could get compromised. I mean, it's definitely real, but from what I've seen, my personal experience of working with startups, and both of us are solutions architects, we work with startups and we want to share the things that we've learned from them of what are the best practices, what are some things that we see that, hey, maybe because you're starting out now, you don't have to make some of those mistakes that they have. And security is definitely, I'd say one of them that like, there's definitely things where it's pretty simple, I would say, to even just implement some things like MFA, which was definitely one of the things we'll get into, that like as small as that is, it actually can be really effective as a way of securing your account.
Yeah, that's correct. And I think maybe for folks dialed in and listening to us, share in the comments, what stage you are. Like, are you in those first 30 days?
Yeah.
Or are you already are building in AWS? Maybe it's like a couple of months in and you're kind of like finding your first users. But share with us. I think that'll be also relevant, and we can chat more about what you are interested in learning. But coming back to the security baseline, right? What we'll share these resources, Jillian. I guess we have a way of sharing the links with the users, the audience. It's split into two things: securing your account and securing your workloads. You want to start with securing your account. And as I mentioned, that this account is kind of like the main asset you have in the very early days. So you want to make sure you secure it. And if you kind of click into it, it has a bunch of sort of 12 sort of things that you should be doing in the first days, or even if you're a lot of months in, you can still go back and do these settings. So the first thing you want to do is set account level contacts for your account, right? This is setting up a billing contact. There's a different configuration for setting your security contact, right? This is if, let's say, AWS detects that your account is maybe compromised. There's got to be a way for us to reach out to you, right? So a common thing is in the early days, you putting your Gmail or email there, but the recommendation is to create like a distribution list, right? So maybe even if you're 2-3 people, make sure you have a distribution list so that somebody is managing it. And as you add your employees to the company, right, there's not one person that the whole account or your whole company is relying on. So make sure that in the and this page gives you step by step on how to where to go to kind of put your contact info. So that should be the first thing you should do. It's basically your gateway, your proxy to AWS. Like, how are we going to contact you when something happens, let it be on billing or security or anything else?
I love that. Basically, so I just posted in the chat for everyone the link to this actual document that Faisal is going through. And what I love to think about it is it's really like your checklist. So think about when you, let's say you have an AWS account now, maybe you have been using it for a while. You could even just use this and, hey, have I turned on MFA? Have I been able to set the account levels, set a valid email address, make sure someone can contact me? Are my buckets private and not public? Like those little, you can just, I think it's just kind of helps you to be able to make sure, all right, I've got some baseline as the document says for my security.
Absolutely. A lot of comments in the chat I was reading.
Yeah, I'm glad I saw that we had a Javier who was saying that he uses MFA, which is, I'm so happy to hear that. MFA is definitely something that really everyone, there's no excuse there because of how quick and easy it is to be able to implement. Everyone should be using MFA.
Yeah, and even if I think the most common thing I've heard is like, oh, I'm not a technical person. I'm a business person. I have this idea. Even then, I think these days, even the non-technical audience is very well versed with something as simple as MFA, right? Because you use that for banking or even most applications these days. You have it set up on your apps. So it's very simple, and it's no different than setting up MFA for like a banking application or anything like that. The other applications you use.
Yeah.
The other thing, I guess the next thing in the account, we won't run through everything, but kind of like the big things that come to mind for me working with startups is restricting the use of the root user. So when you create the AWS
Yes.
account,
Oh, that's a good one.
right, it comes with, if you just create the account, you're using the root user, right? And this account, this kind of root user has all the powers that it can do everything in your account, change, sign up for support plans, shut down the account, right? Imagine like if somebody's like, who are not friends with you and they don't want to, they just kind of compromise your account and they literally shut down the account, right? Of course there are checks before that happens, but you want to make sure that you sign up the account and you create an IAM user and lock away the root user, and it's only used for specific things that you need to do. Right, so I think it's when you need to sign up for a support plan, then you need to sign up using root, or there's a checklist, there's a page in the documentation that requires the root user. Other than that, you should not be using it.
Yeah.
You should not be distributing the root user credentials to other people in the company. That's like a big no-no.
Faisal, we got a great question from Chris Frazier. Does the startup security baseline include any checks related to logging?
Sure. So
Thanks for the question, Chris.
Yeah, that was going to come to. That's another big one. If you think about cloud and how it's kind of sort of different from sort of building in other kind of on premises or something, everything in the cloud is logged. And in the AWS land, we have a service called CloudTrail, which is basically a record of every API call, right? So when you need to, even from troubleshooting perspective, or like you're investigating something and you want to go back and see who did what, how, right? Who made this API call and what they did and what happened as a result. All of those details are in CloudTrail. So you want to make sure that you enable logging for your account. So there are different things you can do. There's you get for free 90 days of logging in the console. So like if I go to, let me switch over to my management console, go to CloudTrail. This is just my demo account. Go in. So you'll see that in the event history, I can see the past 90 days of logs in my account for free, right? But the recommendation is that you set up a trail, which is basically how you're going to be saving logs, and you put them in an S3 bucket. So you have that record for yourself, or in the future if you need it for troubleshooting, for security reasons, for whatever reasons, right? You have that saved and protected and secured.
Oh, and there's another good question that Chris also mentioned that's probably a lot of people's mind is, what about mobile security? So the startup security baseline, this is really agnostic. It doesn't matter exactly what your application is. This is really, you've opened your AWS account. What are the things that you need to do to be able to secure anything that's running in that account?
Yeah.
Faisal, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, we do have, I don't know, Chris, if you're talking about like our mobile, there's like a AWS console mobile app, which is kind of interesting to me. It's like, I'm like more curious, like who uses that? I can imagine like some admin like traveling and wanting to like figure out like what's happening, or start up an EC2 instance or something for a demo purpose. But the same kind of ideas apply to the mobile. Like if you have the MFA, right, to sign in through the mobile app, you still require the MFA or something like that. So that still applies.
Nice. All right. So we've got logging with CloudTrail we covered. All the other things here, really, you can just kind of follow through as like a basic checklist for yourself. Anything else that you want to really cover here before we can talk about some other things people should be doing in their AWS account?
Yeah, I think the other common thing is preventing. This is another big one. Just working with startups. just make sure that if you're using S3 buckets for anything, you are very intentional about making it public or private, right? So, if you're hosting a website, leaving it public, it should be public, and so that folks can, if it's a static website, your users want to be able to reach it. But if you're saving any kind of data or like private data or customer data that you don't intend to be public, make sure that you go to the settings and it's turn the setting to be private, not public.
That is a really good call out. And and I think it's definitely something that, especially as you start developing more in your AWS account, the amount of infrastructure you're running grows. It's very easy to kind of just, for someone maybe on your team, to open up a public S3 bucket when maybe it shouldn't be. So these kind of just reminders of best practices to start doing now, and then be able to have them be best practices that you implement forward, is going to go a long way for you.
Totally. Cool. I think the other thing we can talk about in securing your account is, especially in the early days, is we have one. This one is, I think, underrated. If you're not using something, delete it. Like, if you don't need it.
Oh my God, that is so good.
Right. It's like, that's like the most common one. I actually teach cloud computing, and I have to keep reminding my students, like, you have like $100 or $200 in your account, and you built like a demo or something, you used it, and you can have it as infrastructure as code. So the next time you use it, you need to use it, you can just provision it again. But for the time being, you don't need to have it running. You can just delete that EC2 instance, or actually stop it, or delete any unused resources. It's a simple kind of cost optimization or mechanism for you. You don't need to have the resource running at all times.
Such a good call out. For cost savings perspective, fortunately, in Trusted Advisor, from a cost perspective and even security, it'll show you those areas where, like, hey, you've got that. There are some things, that load balancers that are not attached to EC2, and so that was like mine when I was like messing around in my own dummy account. I see that one a lot. It's so easy to kind of forget, and then you're just wasting money. It's not worth it. So
I think it's probably relevant to everyone, not only
really
the startups.
Everyone,
I've seen the sort of big companies too, just kind of like orphaned resources kind of running, and so have a good idea of what's running in your account, and if you really need it. If for sure, if you're running like a demo or something, if you're launching your product, building it, you need that resource running. But even your developer account, developer sort of sandbox resources, you're not working over the weekend, right?
Yeah.
So when you go home on Friday, just kind of have it as infrastructure as code, and delete those resources. Turn them off, right? That's the sort of the beauty of the cloud. You don't need it to be running at all times. I think on the same, we can talk about budgets. I'm reading the comments here as well.
Yeah. Great call out from Matthew about using AWS organizations, the importance of using multiple accounts. I love it.
Yeah, totally. For like very early days, like this is like I'm pulling my organization console, but it's kind of like, why do I need multiple accounts? Right? It's like this common question I need. It's like, isn't one account enough? Yeah, sure. You could be building in one account, but in the AWS land, and as Matthew rightly pointed out, is, an account is like the atomic security unit or boundary you can think of, right? So at the very least, your production, if you have sort of like, you have launched your product and everything, your production account should be running in a different account than everything else. Like you can have, you can do all kinds of segmentation and split. You can have like pre-prod, staging, sandbox, just R&D, whatever. But you're at the very least have your production different from the other accounts.
Yeah. Oh my God, Faisal, I want to get your opinion on this. Here's my theory. All right, because this is a common question I get asked from people, and it's something I see. When do you actually start using multiple accounts? So let's say you've started to use an AWS account, everything's in one account. And you're probably wondering, all right, I need to use multiple accounts. When do I do it? Because there is a trade-off with it's going to take some time if you've already started to put everything in one account to have to move things in multiple accounts. Do you do it now or do you do it later? So my personal opinion is I suggest like within your first 30 days, I would even do it. Like literally just start Control Tower. It already is going to provision the multiple accounts for you and then start being able to build with those best practices. Now, I understand that like it may slow you down in the beginning because you have to realize, okay, so I've got this production account and then I've got this development and security account. How do I best utilize all of those accounts? So there's that learning curve that will slow you down. But I've also seen on the other side working with late stage startups where when they delay that decision of being able to use multiple accounts, I think it creates more friction down the road because then it becomes this like bigger migration that they have to start planning out. Whereas if you're just starting out, like there's really no stakes because there's like nothing really going on in your account. So there's like nothing, you've got nothing to lose, right? So Faisal, what do you think? Because you work with late stage startups.
Yes, and I think I totally agree with what you just said. It's so here's I'll kind of like try to articulate kind of my thoughts on this. If you're starting, like you have it, you're like it's like the first 30 days for you, and your kind of environment is very small. You're still kind of like testing, building. You're not in production. Do it now.
Yes, do it now.
Do it now. Right?
Mic drop moment right there. Just do it now.
Just do it now. So that's kind of covers for people like, should I do it? Should I not do it? If you're like, very early on in your pre-prod, right? Pre-prod meaning like you haven't launched your product yet. You don't have real users yet. Maybe you're just testing stuff and building and you're like sort of, beta mode. Do it now. Right. And it doesn't take much. It's very easy to do it early because we have the service called Control Tower. And I pulled that up on the screen. And this is the AWS version, a very opinionated version of multi-account. Right. We learned from years of working with customers on what sort of what does best look like when it comes to multi-account. Right. And what kind of segmentation and OUs and accounts and what goes the IDP and there's a concept of guardrail security. So it's all baked into this one service called Control Tower, right? It's actually built on top of many other AWS services, but it gives you sort of one single pane of glass for your multi-account environment, right? To manage it, to observe it, to monitor it, and all of that. So do that now. But for folks who are like, I've launched it, I have real users, I have, you're kind of later on, late stage, you can still do it. There will be a little bit of work involved, but we do have excellent guides and documentation to help there. And actually, one of the startup team members, Justin Plock, just kind of launched how to go from sort of single account to go to multi-account, and it talks about it. So it's a very sort of involved guide, step by step, just like SSB Startup Studio Baseline. I think we should link that as well.
Oh yeah, I'll take a look for it and then I'll drop it here in the chat for people. That's huge.
Awesome. Good question. Wow, very touchy topics.
Yeah, no, that's it's such a big topic. I mean, I've seen even like the consequences. I wonder maybe if you have there was a startup I remember that was a late stage startup. They had everything in one account. And it was fine in the beginning, but now they're a 5-year business and they have some like big traffic sources that they're bringing into their business. And now they're starting to see really, it starts becoming a problem where you've got dev and testing, your CI/CD is all in one and going all in one account. And then you've got big traffic spikes because maybe it's like Black Friday and everything's all in one account. And then it's not good. Yeah. I got the emails from them that how painful it was. So that's one of the reasons why we're like very passionate about saving you from the pain that we've seen other startups be in.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I mean, if you're in that position, we have got, that's kind of like we have our solutions architects. We're here, we have seen the patterns and kind of like the workaround. So you can reach out to your account team and work with us to kind of take you on that journey of
Yeah.
single account to multi-account if you're much later. But if you're early on, as I said before, just do it. It's a little bit of kind of like you maybe need to spend a little bit of time learning about a few concepts and terminology, but doing it uh, doing it now when you're early on is probably the best way to save you a lot of sort of differentiated sort of development work later on, right? Because then you need to sort of take your dev resources away from building your product, and that that's what you're going to be doing to kind of like configuring accounts. That's not what you want to do.
Yeah, I know someone was asking about why our host the pronoun is not displayed on our names. They usually are. I actually just honestly forgot. So mine's she, her. So thank you for just like acknowledging that. Usually they are actually on. It's definitely a practice that we follow.
Yeah, mine's he, him. Yeah, thanks for calling it
Yeah,
out.
thank you. Oh, perfect. Faisal, I found that blog post that you were you were mentioning the prescriptive guidance. So I'm going to drop it in here for everyone. So this is fit. Yeah, definitely check this out, especially like you're running everything in one account and you've got to make that move to multiple accounts. That is a great guide.
Awesome. So on the same, feel free to post your questions in the comments. We're kind of looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Specific questions. We're here. We're happy to kind of chat, but we have a few things I want to talk to you about. On the cost piece, the one thing I do recommend in the first 30 days is setting up budgets, right? And it's like, we all like budgets. We are all on a budget, right? So have that. And it used to be kind of complicated that we had a lot of options, but we have simplified things. Simplest thing I'll kind of tell you how I would do it if I was kind of the first 30 days of a startup. There's a lot of you can use templates, there's advanced option and everything. But a starting point could be setting up a monthly cost budget, right? And it's simply like, okay, how much is your monthly cost? How much do you think you should be? And you could be like $500, whatever the amount makes sense for you. And what it will do is that it will, as you see in here, it's telling you, it will notify you if your actual spend reaches, first 85%. And then again, if it reaches 100%. And it will also tell you your forecasted spend, right? So let's say if you're EC2 running, we can forecast that if it keeps running, this will be the spend. Or if you have a bunch of resources running, we can forecast the spend, what will be at the end of the month. So if it's exceeding, it will also notify you. So that's the simplest thing you could do. There's a lot of sort of granular sort of usage budget and all that we can look into. But the simplest thing you can do is set up a monthly budget.
Emphasize simple. Is something we talk to so many people about. I'm sure Faisal gets the email. I get the email. Hey, can you help me be able to cost optimize? Are you using an AWS budget? No. So it's so simple. Start using it. And another way that I like to think about it is because some of you are probably like, you just open your account like, I don't know what my budget is. I don't have any traffic. I'm still building. I don't have any customers yet. So I would think of it as, what is a number that you want to get notified every time you're getting close to that number? Maybe for you, it's like $100. Maybe it's $50, $500. But that becomes your number to put in. But at least put something in using budgets instead of just not using it. And then you get the bill and then you're like, how did I get this? Why am I spending $1,000 on AWS? So these little things help you be more proactive instead of just wake up, get the bill and wonder how you got there.
Yeah, it's also I would add it's a great kind of security measure as well, and it's also
that's a good call out. Yeah, tell them why.
Yeah, yeah. So let's say if your account is compromised or something, and someone's sort of provisioning EC2 instances to Bitcoin mining or something, this budget alert could kind of alert you that there's a possible we're spending average $500 a month, and all of a sudden the spend went from 500 to like thousands of dollars, right? The budget could quickly tell you that there's something not right in your account, and then you could go check. It actually has happened many times where the initial sort of detection of a possible compromise is through a budget alert. right, in the account.
Yeah, so good. All right, so we've done our budgets. We've set up our budgets. What about quotas and limits?
Yeah, that's another one that like if you're new to AWS, you are sort of, it's a new thing to learn. But typically every service has limits. So let's say by default, when you sign up for the account, you're like, you can launch a certain number of EC2 instances or a certain number of like databases or what have you, right? So just know that every service has limits. And the reason I mentioned this is important is, let's say you're about to sort of publicly launch, right? And then you need to, like, you're kind of, I don't know, it's like the Oprah effect. Your startup gets mentioned on Jillian's show. Maybe we'll get famous. You get your startup famous now, and you
Oprah
have a
show,
lot
yeah.
of users. And you need to scale, and then you run into like, why can't I scale? It's because there are these limits at account level by service that you need to sort of have eyes on. So the simplest thing to do is go into what it used to call limits, now it's called service quotas. You go in there and kind of see what kind of things are in there already, and it's very simple. You open up, you go to, let's say, the service that you want to raise the limit on, EC2, let's say, EC2 auto scaling, right? Or auto scaling groups per region, for example. I don't know. It's like the applied quota is 500. You want to raise it. You simply go in there, request quota increase, put in the number that you want, right? And this is handled by our support team, right? They may ask you, hey, what, it's like if you like are going from 500 to like 5,000 or something, right? They may ask you, what's going on? Is this expected, right? Is this like maybe a typo or something? But in the end, we'll basically raise the limit and off you go, right? This simple thing, it's like maybe a checklist for you to just remember that before you sort of launch, or even as you're building, have an eye on limits and quotas.
Yes, such a good call out. And there is actually a tool that you can implement. I just posted it. It's on Twitch in the comments. It's called the Quota Monitor. So there is a team, by the way, that all they do is based off of customer insights of, hey, these are the things that we are building, but we would like you to be able to build it for us. Different types of tooling. So this is a quota monitor that helps you be able to track your service limits, and then it'll send a message, either maybe like your Slack channel, like email, of when you're starting to get close, so you can start to be proactive instead of just hitting the limits. So yeah, that's just in the chat. Definitely worth checking out and implementing.
Awesome.
All right, so we've got quota limits. Now let's do, there is a blog post that two solutions architects wrote called "The 10 Mistakes Founders Make on AWS." And we want to go through these and explain, based off of our experience working with startups, why these 10 things are really important to actually be able to implement now, and what you can do now, because it definitely falls in line of like the things that are suggested here. Do them within the first 30 days of opening your AWS account. So we covered number one mistake, not setting up AWS budgets. And I think we covered that pretty well, of why it's something that is like really important to do right away, and so simple too. So
Yeah.
number two,
There's no reason. Everyone's listening. Whoever can listen to me right now, go into your budgets and set up a monthly budget.
Yes.
Don't worry about the number itself. It could be, or maybe just look at how much you're spending the past 3 months. That, it's like if you're spending on average 30 or 50 or 5, whatever the number is, right? The number doesn't matter. What does matter is that you have a sort of budget alert for you, based off of your baseline spend. But yeah.
Oh, there's actually, I just noticed a good question that was related to quota. So I want to answer that, and then we can hop back in the rest of here. So Javier has a fantastic question. So when we are starting, what is a good quota amount pre-launch? Faisal, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean it's gonna depend on what you're building, how you're building, and what services you're using, right? It's very likely that you don't need to do anything there. You're okay because when you're okay. But the reason I mentioned quotas is that when you're launching, like publicly launching, and you expect there to be like a spike in traffic, which in result will need resources, right? You want to make sure that let's say if you're doing a launch day, you make sure you run through the thing and see your major services like your compute, database, networking, storage, right? You make sure that those things are you check the quotas on it, and then I think there's no like simple math to kind of figure out what could be the one, but you can start off like if it's for the defaults, defaults are pretty good actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say it's an imperfect science, I guess, is what you could do is do some load testing and say, so okay, given the amount of what I'm running right now, how many requests per second can I be able to handle? Be able to test what is the amount of traffic you expect to be able to get. And then you can kind of start doing the math to figure out, okay, like this one instance can handle X number of requests per second. And then do you need to add more instances? Oh, I realize I'm actually going to have more traffic than the number of instances of this database in my account. So I actually need more to request a limit. And so my guess is from doing that math is it's going to need 3 more instances. So that's another way you can do it. And I can put in the chat. There's another tool by the same team that does that quota monitor tool that you can use to do distributed load testing. And it's a great, especially if you're doing any kind of like PR launch or some where you expect that there's going to be some event that's going to cause for a lot of traffic to increase. It's definitely a great thing to be able to utilize.
I like that imperfect science.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for some services, Jillian, you would know. Like I pulled up on the screen the Lambda concurrent executions, right? The default is 1,000 concurrent executions. For some services, you'll know. Okay, whatever I'm doing, I need 2,000, right? And then you can add a buffer in there. A couple hundred more or thousands more, right? And then you request accordingly. But for other services, you may need to do a little bit of load testing or user testing to be able to find out the limit.
Yeah. So there's another question from Chris. Chris got all these questions. I love all these questions coming in.
I want to add one more thing.
Oh, go ahead.
The limits.
Yeah.
And I get questions sometimes. Why are there these limits? Right?
Oh, yeah.
From the AWS perspective, it's like why? It's like isn't cloud infinite? All that. Yes, but it's also a security measure, I would say. Right? Imagine an account compromise and then not having these limits. It's like then a cost spike unnecessary. So also a bit of a security measure too, that you have these limits in place. So even if someone's trying to like Bitcoin mining, they can only be so much, right? There are limits in place. So there are reasons from a security perspective too for these limits.
Yeah, good call. So yeah, this question is related to what the just topic that we were going into about load testing, getting ready to launch. And it's a lot of elasticity. So maybe Faisal, could you explain maybe just like how elasticity works in AWS?
Sure. So I think I'm going to kind of repeat the question. Elasticity, how does that work? Say my sales are higher in the summer, but lower in the winter. How does that work? Isn't that a cloud resource? Yes. So I'll take a very simple example. Let's say, you launched an application on EC2, right? EC2 instances, which are EC2s are like virtual servers that you get. And it's you launch it, it's a web server, and you begin with like one server. You're like day 1 or day 29, and it's working fine for you. Maybe that web server is attached to a database and everything's working fine. But then you kind of, as Chris mentioned, sales are higher and there are more people accessing the web application. You're going to need more web servers to handle that capacity, right? So when we say cloud is elastic, this is what we mean. You can on demand scale out, right? You can add more web servers. And you can, by the way, you can also scale in, right? Elasticity is kind of both ways. When the traffic is lower, you don't need that extra 3 servers. One is fine, right? So it should be that way. The way you do that in AWS and all the services are elastic in their sort of different way. With EC2, something called auto scaling groups, right? And as the name implies, the auto scaling group based on the traffic will automatically add new EC2 instances. You need to configure it, right? Based on, how many do you want to add, based on network traffic, network sort of thing, based on, HTTP requests. So there are different things based on CPU utilization of the existing server. So there's a lot of sort of ways to set it up. But when we say it's elastic, using auto scaling groups and maybe a load balancer, you can scale out. And when after the summer, maybe the sales are, there's less traffic, you can scale back in. So you're not paying for those extra servers when you don't need them.
I love that explanation. And in fact, on this bigger topic that it sounds like, Chris, that you're getting into is really, okay, how do I think about the architecture that's going to help me to be able to scale based on the actual fluctuations and needs of your business? So on January 31st, same time as today, the actual topic for this show we're doing is on really how to choose your architecture. And we're going to go through different architecture patterns that we see startups be able to implement and how they're able to do so. That's be able to design for scale, elasticity, cost effectiveness. So yeah, come back on same time, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, whatever time zone it is for you. I think UK was 6 o'clock at night. And it'll be on the 31st, and that's what we're going to talk about. So thanks so much for that question.
Awesome. That was great.
Yeah.
It's been a while. I had to explain elasticity.
That was a really good explanation, by the way. All right. Business support. That was the next one we were on. Mistake number 3. This is one that I think I think every business, once you are at the point where it is critical for you to be able to get a response from support, maybe like at night, maybe at those non-working hours, it makes sense to have business support. If you can wait like after those business hours and you'd rather like for you, maybe like preserving cash is the most important factor right now to you. And so you'd say, all right, I'd rather wait maybe I can wait the next day and have like a slower response time from a support engineer if if an issue were to happen, then developer support could be fine. But the challenge is like if some issue were to happen in your production account and you actually have customers and you need a support engineer, it's going to be longer for you to be able to either get in touch with an actual support engineer. And that's just because of the different SLAs between business support and developer support. Weekends, that's not going to be an option either. So I definitely say, especially for you, like if you want to be able to get the support right away, able to chat, screen share with someone in support, business support, I think is absolutely worth the investment.
Yeah, I second that on. And I think, if you're running any kind of real business with real users, you need business support.
Oh yeah, right? Absolutely. Yeah.
Like 2 a.m, it's like you have any sort of real users and, it's like, people could be using your application given what it is, right? Likely that they're using off business hours too. And if something were to happen, you want to make sure you're able to reach. Another thing I want to emphasize on the support one is sometimes you go like, I don't need support. I've got smart engineers that can figure everything out.
Oh my God, so many people say that.
And that's great. Actually, for many startups, and the reason I actually work with startups, they get to kind of like work with the smartest people working on some niche problem domain. But it's not about how much your engineers are smart. It's like when you need help from AWS, when there's sort of, they're like, this service should be, it's like when there's some issue that AWS you need to kind of work with AWS to work with. That's where support comes in. Not only that, let's say you're building, you're like, you know what, it's going to take me a day to research something on how to build something on AWS. You can actually ask question to a support engineer. And it's likely that they have a very sort of, polished run book or playbook on how to do certain things.
And they're experts on the
code with you, a code snippet or a script that you don't have to write. So they can save you a lot of time, instead of like searching forums and Stack Overflow. Simply ask the question. And I've seen where, I think that's like more important than, more relevant, or it resonates better with my startup customers, that you can have that time saving with support.
Oh my God. And then as someone, both of us who have worked with support engineers, these are subject matter experts on the actual services themselves. So let's say you open up a support ticket for EKS. The person who's actually been looking at that is an engineer that just works on EKS, or maybe they work on other containers, but that is their expertise. So like, you are getting an expert. So it is absolutely worth it. It'll save you time compared to going down the Reddit and Stack Overflow rabbit hole. Open the support ticket and then go do your research too, but don't just like not leverage AWS support, especially business support. Okay, I think with that one, I think we've definitely preached. Terry, I'm so glad that you say this is great. And hello from Denver. I love it that this is people from all over the world joining us.
Yeah, I think Javier has, I think he asked the question, do you do one-on-ones with startups on, I think he meant activate program. Yes. So actually we can do one-on-one. If you have an AWS account, if you're building on AWS, know that you have an account team that you can reach out to. So yes, you absolutely you can work with a solutions architect or an account manager to get you plugged into different resources on the startups team or AWS in general.
All right. So now mistake number 3. Did we go over that? The root account and IAM users? Oh, we did cover root.
Yeah, we talked about budgets, support. We talked about not using root users, using IAM users, MFA. That's another big
we did cover that one.
Right. This one is interesting.
Yeah, that's the good one.
Infrastructure as code.
Yeah, what do you think about this one, Faisal?
I'm a little bit split on this. It's like, because I want to be real.
I won't tell our friends.
Yeah, don't tell Britton and Jordan.
Yes.
It's like, if you're early on, and I've seen, startups, it's very quick to kind of like do things in the console, right? But so I want to give like kind of both sides of this. So very early on, I think it's okay to do that, but it should be in the back of your mind that, building things with infrastructure as code. In the AWS case, it's CloudFormation. You could be using Terraform, whatever your choice is there. But it's long term. If you do that in the beginning, spend additional time, it will save you tons of time. But I do understand that sometimes it's just like, hey, I just need to like do this demo and just want to do it in the console. It's okay to do that in the very beginning, but it should be on your to-do list to convert your AWS infrastructure into infrastructure as code. And there are a few reasons for that. The top one that I would say is that, let's say something were to happen. I don't know, something goes wrong. The engineer that you're working with, sort of, you have disagreement with them, they leave or something like that. If you have infrastructure as code, it's like you can just deploy it again, right? And you have your application and everything. So that's the top one. And second, avoiding any misconfigurations, right? You set up your database in a certain way with certain settings and security and all that. You tend to kind of like console actually changes too. We update console all the time. So, but you have infrastructure as code. It's code, right? Developers love code and they understand that really well, and that's not going to change, right? So repeatability is another one, and avoiding misconfigurations.
Yeah, even another one I would add is like, okay, what if there was like a disruption in a region, and so you needed to be able to be prepared to like launch your services in another region. If you have that as like a template, then you can just like go into the console, just like click, put your template, and then now you've got like basically a copy of what you were using, in the region you were going in before, now in a new region. So being able to, and I know a lot of, when I talk to early stage startups, they're already starting to think about those things like, oh, like how do I be prepared just to make sure that my business is running. And that's just one way to be able to, have a plan.
Yeah, that's actually a good one. I didn't think about. Yeah, for any kind of even AWS, service disruption, or even just kind of like other, uh, it's kind of like having your application is like described in code, the
Yeah.
infrastructure. Just like it's kind of like you're source controlling your application code, and just like that, you should source control your infrastructure as
Mhm.
well. Save it so you get able to relaunch whenever you need to.
Yeah. All right. So number 6 is really when they say rolling your own instead of using a managed service, it's basically when you're running something on EC2, you're running a database on EC2 versus like a managed AWS offering of that database. So, Faisal, what do you think about this one from what you've seen in your experience of working with startups?
Yeah, so I worked with many early stage as well, and even when I go to the Loft, we have Loft in New York City, and they're like like students who are like launching their startup. They're part of the accelerator. You're used to like I know I think it comes from the academic setting. You're like you given a server and you want to launch like data. You would need to set up the server to for the database, and you install your database sort of a configuration on it, and then that becomes your database like the server. But that takes a lot of time, right?
Yes.
And coming from kind of academics in school, you kind of taught to do that. It's good to like know that and learn that. But when you're building sort of, for real users, you're always on time crunch, right? And also you need to, if you do that yourself, you need to manage it for on all kinds of different dimensions. So when we say, use the managed service, so something like, instead of like creating a database on EC2, use RDS, our Amazon's RDS service, relational database service, right? What comes with that is AWS takes care of running the infrastructure of the database, right? The underlying EC2, if there is an issue with that, it's like AWS takes care of the responsibility of sort of making sure that it's up and running. You still get to sort of configure your database and do all the things that a database admin would do, but a lot of the heavy lifting is done by the service itself, right? So that's like one example of using a managed service. What's another one that I'm trying to think? Database is probably the most.
Yeah, I mean, running Postgres like
Yeah.
on RDS instead of running it on an EC2 instance, running MySQL, running Kafka like on Amazon Managed Streaming Kafka versus running it on an EC2 instance. Like these are just some great examples. So I guess advice that I have to you is that like before you actually start running something, I would first think, hey, does AWS have like a managed version of that I can run instead of having to run it myself? Because I get those emails. You probably get those emails too of people who maybe run like Postgres on EC2, and maybe it's fine when there's like no data, but there comes a point where you just spend more time managing it than actually being able to like build features that really matter. When you're a startup, I mean, time and cash are limited. So you really got to be able to move quickly. And that's absolutely going to be able to help.
Yeah, totally. That's like probably one of the reasons that many startups like to start off with Lambda, which is our
Yes.
event-driven serverless computing, right? You simply write your code, don't even think about servers. You're running a server, and you just kind of have your business logic code, and you use Lambda, API gateway, a database in the backend, like a DynamoDB or something, and off you go, right? It's kind of anytime, anywhere where you can use a managed service, do that, and only do kind of run your own thing in the absence of when there is nothing. But it's likely that we have a managed service for kind of the major things that you need.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. I think the other one, Jillian, we have 4.
Okay.
When are we
Yeah,
ending?
okay.
I wanna make sure
We're almost out of time, so we can just kind of quickly go through these. Let's maybe go, and then we will wrap up. So IAM, and I can send you the actual blog post too. So people can check this out.
Or you can also just search top 10 mistakes founders make.
Yep, I found it.
And
I'm going to post it in for everyone. Yeah, so I think which one of these do you say, Faisal, is one that maybe you see the most common that you want to go over, if we only have time for one more?
I think I would go with CloudFront.
Okay.
The CDN. Because I think many people are familiar with CDN, what the CDN is. In the Amazon land, it's CloudFront. And with startups, how many times you go to like a startup website, it's like takes forever to load.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right.
And now, I mean, people like the tolerance for that has gone like people have no tolerance for that. People need things instantly. So
yeah, right. So it's like, and it kind of leaves an impression on you. It's like, oh, maybe, it's like, why is this, these are supposed to be smart people. Why are their websites taking forever to load? So I would say use no matter how you're building your sort of web application, if you're using EC2 load balancer, if you have it on API gateway, and it doesn't matter. You can have a CloudFront CDN in front of it, and what it will do is that it will cache the most common sort of assets closest to the users. We have these edge locations throughout the country, in the US and throughout the world. I forget the number of edge locations, but it's likely that we have a lot of them.
Yeah.
What it will do is that it will just speed up loading your website. So the traffic doesn't have to go all the way back to the data center to fetch the resource. It can be fetched from the edge location closest to the user, so the website loads faster. It's just one way to kind of like have a good impression of your startup website, startup application for your users.
Yeah, really good call out. Make sure you use a CAN. Check out. I posted the link to the blog post. This is something you definitely want to go through and make sure you're implementing these best practices right away. And the startup security baseline. This is a weekly show. It's going to be at the same time every single Tuesday. Next Tuesday on the 24th, we're going to talk about how to best utilize AWS and the startup resources. On the 31st, we're talking about how to choose your first architecture on AWS. If there's any topics related to, yeah, it's a big topic. Any topics that related to how to start building your business on AWS, building a startup, let me know. You can hit me up on Twitter at Miss Jill Ford. And this is really a place where I want to help you be able to get your questions answered. So thank you so much, everyone from all over the world, spending time with us, asking really amazing questions. And we're just going to keep being here for you every single Tuesday. So thanks so much.
Yeah, this was fun. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.